back around the 2016-2017 time period, there were protests held in various places throughout the world, notably Poland and Charlottesville. However, there is one that flew under the radar because of the corporate media that was going on around the same time. That was the candlelight protests to impeach the South Korean president. Now, I hadn't known about any of this until I started looking into the alleged voter fraud that happened in their most recent 2020 election. I went looking to see what it was about and to see if any of it could foreshadow events in our upcoming election. Not only did I find that there are some eerie similarities between how our system is set up and how South Korea's is set up, but I found that before our impeachment, they had a very similar impeachment. And it seems like the same hand that is behind these things, I can see it here working in South Korea. Now, what's interesting is the president that got ousted was a right-winger, comparatively, and President Moon, who replaced her, left. And this was happening right in concert with the American elections. So, as everyone had expected, if Hillary had won, the situation we would have had is Hillary Clinton is president and an impeached conservative president pushed out of office so that a liberal president could take her place. The more I look into this situation, the more eerie it gets when you look at the similarities. And one has to wonder if this kind of stuff is going on in South Korea, and then it happened here, and now there's voter fraud in South Korea, is it not logical to think, and then it happened here? I feel like it's at least a possibility that just as their impeachment in late 2016 foreshadowed the impeachment of Donald Trump, it's possible that the accusations of rampant voter fraud in their 2020 election could be a foreshadowing for our election also. I mean, there's a certain level of accusations against South Korea that wouldn't be able to go on in the United States because we already have safeguards in place. For instance, there's being reported a huge problem with their tamper-free tape. And I'll just let you take a look at a South Korean YouTube channel real quick about they're demonstrating this tamper-proof tape that's been used in this election. All right.
이게 봉인지라는데 거의 스카치 테이프예요, 스카치 테이프.
그러니까 이게
붙여보시죠.
무슨 뭐 봉인지라는 게.
근데 이렇게 허술하게 관리가 돼요?
이렇게 붙여보세요. 스카치 테이프.
그다음에 이제 그
가위로 있어요. 아, 도장
찍어야지.
김용구 장 가운데다 사인하세요, 여기다.
지장이라도.
이렇게 이어지게 해야지 원래 우리 할 때 난리 날 때.
이렇게 원래 이제 도장을 찍어야 되는데 이렇게 사인을
이렇게 해야 되는데
이게 막 밀려 있어.
아, 그때는
이거 사인 뜯어. 이거 사인 뜯어. 이거 사인 뜯어. 이거 뜯었네.
라인이 반만 돼 있어.
상남자 스타일. 이거 다시 해야 돼. 뜯었어. 아니야. 상남자 스타일 아니야. 이거는 잘못됐어. 다시 붙여야 돼. 이거 하나 더 붙여. 이렇게 다시 붙여야 돼. 야. 덧대. 아, 이거는 이렇게 해가지고 이렇게. 야, 오늘 이거 나온다 우리가. 야, 이렇게 막 하자. 애초에 도장은 없었어. 저 이거 안 뜯어봤습니다. 아, 봉인 돼 있죠?
아니 근데 이게 봉인지가 아무 의미가 없는 게 붙였다 뗐다 해도 아무 상관없어.
그러니까.
붙였다 뗐다 해도 아무 상관없어.
그러니까.
그래. 막 안에 뭐 도장이 껄 사인이 껄.
이거
붙였다 뗐다 하기 더 쉽게 돼 있어.
이게 무슨 봉인지요?
무슨 봉인지라는 게 봉인을 이렇게 이명인데 뭐 찢어주든지 해가지고 뭐 티가 나야지.
아니 무슨 포스트잇이야 포스트잇 해가지고 그냥.
포스트잇이야? 오히려 포스트잇이야. 잘 안 떨어지는 것도 아니고 너무 잘 떨어져.
진짜 이거 밑도 끝도 없어. 사인이
밑도 없이 아무 생각 없이 그냥 이렇게 하는 거야.
그리고 우리 이거 절대 안 뜯어봤어. 우리 이거 절대 안 뜯어. 이거 안 뜯어봤어.
오해하지 마시고.
이래 놓고서 절대 안 뜯어봤다.
아니 근데 너무 웃긴 게 그냥 이렇게 잡고
그러니까 아니 봉인지라는 게 뜯다가 도중에 찢어지거나 이래야지 봉인지지. 그냥 스카치 테이프.
아니 스카치 테이프는 차라리 딱딱이라도 붙여줘.
그러니까
왜냐면
맞아
포스트잇이야 포스트잇.
아니 종이가 훼손이 돼야 되잖아. 또 그 정도의 접착력도 없어.
그러니까 박스에도 영향을 안 미치고 이것도 테이프대로야.
그러니까 이게 무슨 봉인지예요?
또 붙였다가 근데 표수가 맞나 한번 세볼까? 다시 꺼내서 야 털어봐. 세보자.
야야야
모자란다. 모자 정신 좀. 모자 안 찍었는데요. 빨리 찍어 새끼야.
빨리 사이트 다시.
아 여기 그거 나오잖아요. 더 붙여. 더 빼. 이게 무슨 봉인지야?
아 이거 사진 뜯어. 이거 사진 뜯어. 이거 사진
붙여다 댔다가 안 가봐. 붙여다 댔다가 안 가봐. 꼴 사인.
And the reason why I want to draw attention to this now is because the South Koreans are in an untenable position. Now that there's been accusations and they want to do a recount, they can't. One of the courts refused to turn over the early voting ballots. I would suspect because they don't have them in correct numbers. And the accusations that the voting machines themselves were unable to be hacked. And I'll let you look at another video from citizen journalists in South Korea and let you make a decision on whether or not those machines could be hacked.
아 뭐야? 렉 걸린 줄 알았는데. 잠깐만. 여기 꺼봐.
So just like here in the States, there's a lot of citizen journalism that's going on in South Korea, and that's great. But also, just like the United States, the corporate legacy media in South Korea is diametrically opposed to the people of that country, and they do the exact same things that our media here does. In fact, as we go through these articles, keep in the back of your mind connections between what's going on in the United States in our recent history and what's going on in South Korea, and just look at how strikingly similar these two situations are playing out in parallel right next to each other. Okay, so we'll get into the articles. What's going on, guys? We're over here at the World Tribune. Been keeping track of this for a little while now, and it's time for us to have a talk about it. It's starting to look like it could possibly be a foreshadowing of events, we'll call it. This is going on in South Korea. They had an election in the middle of the bug. So, allegations of fraud in South Korean elections called warning on new voting technologies. This is in May 8th. Suspicions of election fraud arose last month after South Korea's general election, a report says. The ruling party of leftist President Moon Jae-in won by a landslide in a parliamentary election last month that attracted the highest voter turnout in 28 years, despite being held during the CV panic. Particular attention was paid to, quote, a new field of digital fraud involving vote counting machines, computer hardware and software, and Huawei information network telecommunications equipment, noted in a May 8th analysis for East Asia Research Center. South Korea's National Election Commission chose LGU plus 5G, which uses Huawei equipment to provide internet and Wi-Fi for handling the pre-vote ballots. Meanwhile, the winning party is also behaving oddly, Tara O wrote. It is remarkable how muted the reaction has been from the Democratic Party of Korea. Yang Young-cho, the head of Democratic Party of Korea's think tank Institute for Democracy, which is responsible for the party's election strategy, should have been elated at such a sweeping election victory, but was not. Yang, who is also President Moon Jae-in's confidant, instead said he was terrified at the outcome and quickly resigned. When a journalist pointed out that he played the most important role in this election and asked for a comment, Yang's answer was strange and cryptic. Yang answered, I'm terrified and afraid because they made such an enormous outcome, landslide victory for his party, and expressed his desire to resign his position as the head of Institute for Democracy. Further, he expressed, I'll return to the backwaters and will stay quietly as if to wait for a sunset. According to final results from the April 15th election, Moon's Democratic Party won 180 of the 300 seats in the National Assembly, boosting the party's seats by 60. This is the biggest win by any party since the nation's constitution was established in 1987. Instead of establishing its own secured network, which it could have had done by using the very secure Information Data Center, NEC chose an unsecured network, and worse, used a network that uses Huawei equipment notorious for control by China. It is possible the servers used at the election sites could have been connected to servers in China or elsewhere, and the user on that end in China can send the instructions to the central server in South Korea, which in turn sends a message to the vote counting machines, the analyst said. The election process and outcome did not inspire confidence among the voters, but raised questions about them, and this is the real problem. In that case, steps should be taken to restore the confidence, such as conducting an investigation of the election similar to that of the OAS model, recount the votes, and change the election law or procedures to address the gaps and flaws in the election process to be applied to future elections. Additionally, other democracies should take note about the increased potential for election fraud with the advent of new technology and procedures, and be careful about the vote counting machine system and the early voting process. Free and fair elections are too important to liberal democracy for the citizens to not demand integrity and transparency of the election process, and for the authorities to not take measures to enhance trust in the election system. National Assemblyman Min Kyung-wook, United Future Party, on April 28 filed with the Yeonsu District Court in Incheon to preserve the election materials for further investigations. Min lost by 2,893 votes to Democratic Party of Korea's Young Il-yong. The elected candidates will take their seats as of May 30th. The court granted preserving the ballots, but not the server and other information and communications gear. Others, such as the Christian Liberty Unification Party, also submitted a request with the court to preserve the servers and other election materials. The servers used for the election are rented from a contractor, and they were reportedly destroyed on May 1st. Those seeking an investigation that, by rejecting the request to preserve the servers and other communications equipment gear, the judge's decision was tantamount to destroying the evidence. Additionally, the Yeonsu District Election Commission handed over the same-day ballots, but defied the court order and refused to provide early vote ballots. The actions of the judge and the local election commission also raised suspicions that erodes the public confidence in the election process and outcome. Now, this should sound familiar to you guys because this is exactly what went down in Alabama. If you'll remember our favorite Anon, drew attention to that special election down there, and there was a lot of funny bunny that went on around it. We're also talking about the California district seats that were flipped during the midterms election. Both of those involved election fraud, in my opinion, and it was a new kind of election fraud. Now, at the time, we were thinking that this election fraud was being observed, but I'm getting tired of hearing that we have to let it play out so everyone can see it. That's starting to get old. If we saw election fraud in Alabama and we saw election fraud in those districts in California, then they should do something about it immediately. I understand why they got rid of Huawei, and I'm glad that they did. It seems like that's a huge security breach, but it doesn't give me any confidence in our system that we have these electronic ballot counting systems as well. The percentage of early votes / mail-in votes in April election was high at 26.69%, and in many cases reversed the outcome on the election day. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea and its satellite party together won by a landslide, gaining 180 seats, which is a simple majority to change laws at will, except for the few that require a supermajority, such as the Constitution. Citizens for Fair Elections posted stickers urging citizens to vote on the actual election day, not early vote, due to concerns about the security and the break in the chain of custody of early vote ballots, the report noted. But the NEC dismissed the group's concerns and instead sued the group for distributing false facts. So we're seeing complicity with the courts. We're seeing attacks on people who are raising questions. They're being called distributing false facts, or they're basically being called fake news. So we have the media is not covering this at all. We have the courts in South Korea are participating in this. It looks like it's got China's fingerprint on it. And I can't help but to think that this is portending a bad future for 2020. Lee Jun-hyung, the Strategy and Planning Committee chair of the Democratic Party of Korea, also played a crucial role in the election strategy and outcome, also said he is leaving the position and the party, posting on his Facebook page, "I am leaving with heavy weights off my shoulders." Yang also said, "The reason we were able to come this far is due to the courage and wisdom of party leader Lee Hang-chen. Our party will pay respect to his leadership for a long time." Lee Hang-chen also did not express great joy, despite his party winning such unprecedented numbers of seats. His expression was serious, and he said, "As I look at the election results, I feel the heavy burden of responsibility rather than the joy of victory." Tara Oh added that neither Lee Hang-chan nor Lee In-young, the floor leader, nor Lee Nak-eon, the prime minister who won a seat in the Jeongdong district, showed joy, not even a smile, which is very odd for the winning party. Lee talked of his party seizing power for 20 years and later increased it to 50 years. In July 2019, Yang went to Beijing to sign an agreement between the Democratic Party of Korea's Institute for Democracy and the Communist Party of China's Party School, perhaps to learn the secrets of the longevity of one-party rule. And guys, there's a reason why I'm saying what I'm seeing in South Korea, I'm worried about it coming here. Because I'm going to read you a story about the former president of South Korea, Park Geun-hye. Until the coronavirus stopped mass gatherings, a large group of South Koreans gathered weekly for over 3 years to protest President Park Geun-hye's impeachment and imprisonment and to demand her freedom. Many in the West were led to believe that the impeachment of South Korea's President Park Geun-hye was due to corruption and bribery. Ask South Koreans, however, and they will say it was Gukjeonnongdon. The dictionary states monopoly of state affairs, but people understood it to mean the Park Geun-hye's friend, Choi Seo-won, was running the country, not President Park. The proof? A tablet PC. So the story goes. JTBC's infamous tablet PC story aired multiple times in October 2016. Got the timing? October 2016. claiming that a certain tablet belonged to Choi San-won, and Choi walked around with the tablet, editing speeches and received meeting notes. Thus, this proves, according to the narrative, that Cho runs the country. As absurd and unfounded as the claim is, the reality is that this conjecture embarrassed and angered the public, and they joined very well organized candlelight demonstrations. Demonstrations created by the same groups, including militant Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, that also organized anti-US beef demonstrations in 2008. So what she's saying here is it's the same deep state that caused those problems in 2008. There are more than a few now who regret that they joined the candlelight demonstrations, as they watch the increasing unemployment, falling exports, declining economic growth, and growing national debt, which were already occurring under the Moon administration before the CV pandemic. They also have become disillusioned by the discoveries of massive corruption, such as the cases, here's a case, there's a case, there's a case, there's a case. I'm not going to try to go through all those names. For challenging JTBC's tablet story, JTBC sued 4 journalists, 2 of whom were sent to jail for libel. Now out on bail after a year in prison, journalist Byung-Hing Jai had discovered that the tablet belonged not to Choi, but to Kim Hong-soo, the very person who pointed the finger at Choi, which is a false testimony and perjury by Kim Han-soo. Choi has maintained that the tablet is not hers and questioned the ever-changing claims by the JTBC about where it obtained the tablet. JTBC expressed that it discovered the tablet in a trash can in Germany, then later from a trash can in Choi's basement, and then later from a desk drawer in an office. It's like they have as much trouble keeping track of tablets in South Korea as we do servers in the US. Although the tablet was useful in instigating public discontent, the court did not admit the tablet as evidence for impeachment because there was no legal basis for it to be admitted as evidence, yet many candlelight goers are unaware that this was the case. For a variety of political reasons, the National Assembly voted to impeach Park in only 6 days, with no hearings and no investigations. The National Assembly introduced impeachment proposal on December 3, 2016, and voted on it on December 6, 2016. The impeachment bill contained a long list of charges, including violating the freedom to choose one's employment, which makes one question how it is related to Gukjeong-nongdon. Gukjeong-nongdon is not even listed as a crime in any written South Korean legal code, yet the National Assembly and the prosecution justified the impeachment as arising from Gukjeong-nongdon, and the news stories as evidence. Of the 21 attachments to the impeachment bill, none were evidence. The attachments were 15 newspaper articles and charges against other people. For a list of the new articles, see here. Okay, so what we're seeing is the same thing that played out in the US. They put out all these bogus charges and then they had to pull them back, and then when we got to look at what the charging documents were, what was it? It was the collusion with the media. It was the deep state colluding with the media. It's exactly what you're seeing here, and there's only one piece that's missing. Without any hearings or investigations, the National Assembly impeachment bill charged that Park violated the following, which is strikingly extensive. You can see all this here. Number 12 is etc. There was an etc. just in case the list was not extensive enough, but the vague etc. is not an impeachable offense. This is yet another example of how shoddy and rushed the impeachment resolution was. There is still no proof Park violated these. The National Assembly also charged Park with conducting a variety of crimes violating legal codes as follows: additional punishment law on specific crimes, bribery, interference with the exercise of the right to investigate abuse of authority, compel, leaking of official secrets, etc. Again, the vague term etc. is used. In addition to several criminal codes, a sitting president cannot be impeached for any of these criminal charges. The Constitution, Section 84, states, "The president shall not be subject to criminal prosecution while in office, except in cases of insurrection and treason." Many of these charges related to the idea that Choi interfered in state affairs, gongqing nongdong, which is why the tablet is so crucial. If the tablet did not belong to Choi, essentially there is no proof of Choi interfering in state affairs. Yet the tablet was never admitted to the court as evidence because it could not legally fulfill that role. Even if Choi did provide advice, how is it an impeachable offense? The president should be able to seek counsel from others. Doesn't that sound familiar? Another impeachment charge dealt with the Sewell ferry sinking, blaming Park for the deaths. JTBC and other mass media played a major role in creating a damaging image of Park through inaccurate reporting and coverage of rumors about the missing 7 hours, which also angered the public and added fuel to the candlelight impeachment demonstrations. These candlelight demonstrations in 2016. Each charge in the articles of impeachment should have been drafted as an individual charge in the document, and a vote should have been taken on whether the president committed each charge in the articles of impeachment. Instead, all these charges were lumped into a single vote, making it impossible to consider the merits of each charge. Any effort to prove all these charges would have taken years to investigate. The lawmakers, many of whom did not even read the impeachment proposal, voted to impeach a sitting president in only 6 days after introducing such a proposal. There still has been no proof that Park Chung-hye violated any laws or committed any of the crimes she was charged with. With no verification of facts, impeachment based only on suspicions is against the Constitution. Earlier I said we were watching the collusion between the deep state, the legislative side of it, and the media, and we were only missing one part of it, and this is it. Now we've got the bureaucracy, the judiciary, and the media all working together on this. The National Assembly and the Constitutional Court have separate roles. The National Assembly approves or disapproves the articles in the impeachment resolution by majority vote. The Constitutional Court considers the merits of the impeachment resolution in a trial, then votes to accept or reject the impeachment. Instead of rejecting the impeachment bill, the Constitutional Court helped the National Assembly Judiciary Committee rewrite it. Doesn't this all just sound vaguely familiar, like we lived it in 2 years later? Because you can remember, this was in 2016. December 22nd, 2016, the Constitutional Court judge advised the National Assembly Impeachment Committee to rewrite the impeachment resolution by organizing the impeachment articles to 5 broader categories, and then even spelled out the 5 articles for the committee, and later received from the committee a different version of the resolution from the version that had been voted upon. On January 5th, 2017, the judge advised the National Assembly Impeachment Committee to delete the 5th article of impeachment, violating various criminal laws including receiving bribery. As stated earlier, the Constitution does not allow a president to be subject to criminal prosecution while in office unless the charges are of insurrection or treason. Thus, on February 1st, 2017, the National Assembly Impeachment Committee submitted a separate document called Embodiment of Type of Reasons for Impeachment. Additional reasons for impeachment were added later. Thus, the impeachment resolution was no longer the one that was voted on by the National Assembly, but a different document produced as a result of collaboration between the legislative branch and the judiciary branch. The Constitutional Court ruled on the impeachment based on the embodiment of type of reasons for impeachment document, and not the original impeachment bill, which contains more articles that were not impeachable under the Constitution and did not contain some of the new items inserted in the embodiment document. The fundamentally revised embodiment document had never been voted upon by the National Assembly. This ad hoc process, no hearing, no direct investigations, no evidence, and the fact that the Constitutional Court voted 8-0 under such dubious circumstances is the abandonment of the rule of law by the very people entrusted with the special responsibility to uphold and protect it, and a great crime against the citizens of the Republic of Korea. If the law can be upended at will over the passions of the people, then it can be said that there is no law at all, and South Korea has devolved into mob rule. As for the bribery and corruption charges often mentioned in Western press, they were brought up in criminal cases after Park's impeachment. There were 3 separate trials on 20 charges. One trial covered 18 charges, while the other 2 trials covered 1 charge each. Among the 18 charges of the trial that were covered more extensively by the press, the most serious and controversial charge is bribery, although there is no evidence that Park received any money. There are myriads of issues, but the most prominent is the case regarding Samsung. Samsung sponsored Choi's daughter, Chung Yu-ra, a 2014 Asian Olympics gold medal winner equestrian, and other equestrians to practice their sport for international competition by providing access to 3 horses. This type of private sector sponsorship of the nation's top athletes, which is often practiced in many countries besides South Korea, was deemed a bribe. The prosecutors and the judge decided that Samsung providing access to horses to equestrian Chung Ra was a bribe, and Chow Sung-won, as Chung's mother, was guilty by association, and that Park Jin-hai and Choi conspired, and thus were guilty. This claim of a complex arrangement between unrelated parties is incredibly difficult to explain, let alone investigate or even prove beyond a reasonable doubt. In order to try and strengthen the argument of association, the judge deemed that Park was a common economic community with Choi. Choi strongly opposed, saying the idea of a common economic community cannot occur in the Republic of Korea unless it is a socialist state. And I'm afraid she's right. Additionally, one thinks of North Korea or China when one hears guilt by association, not South Korea, yet that is what happened in South Korea. The judge also determined that there was a silent request by Samsung's vice president in helping Lee inherit Samsung. It is unclear how Park could help who becomes the head of a private entity, but even more incredulous is how they determined there was a request when they had no discussion about it. There was no evidence of any request, but the judge ruled that Park was guilty by conjuring up a new type of justification, a silent request. To observers, it appears as if the court already decided Park was guilty, and it was just a matter of coming up with the terminology to justify it. Other companies have provided financial support for other athletes in Korea, not only under Park Geun-hye's administration, but also under the Moon Jae administration. To prepare for the Winter Olympics in Pyongyang, private companies such as LG Electronics, Hyundai, Korean Air, KB Financial, SK Telecom, and POSCO spent $800 million to $1 billion to sponsor athletes during the Moon administration, the one that's in now. And they say if a company sponsoring national athletes is considered a bribe, then one must conclude that President Moon Jae is also receiving bribes. During the initial trial, the prosecutor wanted a 30-year jail sentence. Seoul Central District Court judged that Samsung's provision of 3 horses owned by Samsung and associated costs insurance fees worth $6.4 million to equestrian Chung Yu-ra was a bribe and interpreted that Park received the bribe. The judge deemed that the total amount of bribery received was $18 million. As mentioned earlier, she did not receive any money, and there is no evidence that proves bribery occurred. On April 6, 2018, the judge sentenced Park to 24 years in jail and fined her $16.2 million, stating she does not show remorse. In fact, she stopped attending the trials in October 2017 after she realized the court was rigged. The prosecutor appealed the case, and at the appeals court, the bribery amount from Samsung increased to $7.8 million. The judge increased Park's sentence to 25 years and the fine to $180 million. The Supreme Court returned the case to the Seoul High Court, instructing it to split the case. She also received additional jail sentences of 8 years from other cases, for a total of 33 years in prison sentences. Don't you love how obsessed they are with numbers? In South Korea, there is a limit to how long one can stay in prison during a trial waiting for the judge's final decision, which includes appeals. Initially, Park, who was imprisoned for the first case, was expected to be released from prison on April 16, 2019, since she met the legal maximum duration requirement and the bribery case is still not finalized. She was, however, not released. Compare that with Cho Kuk's wife, Jung Kyung-sim, who had been jailed for the massive corruption scandal, including investing a large portion of their assets, $1.4 million, in a private equity fund funded by the Chinese government that led to huge public protests in October 2019. She was caught on camera removing her computer from office, for which she was also charged with destruction of evidence. Despite her acts and the prosecutor's request to extend her imprisonment, the Seoul Central District Court judge released her on May 10, 2020, after 6 months in jail, stating it is impossible for her to try to flee. This unevenness in the enforcement laws continues to make a mockery of justice and rule of law in South Korea. On November 21, 2018, the Seoul High Court judge handed Park Jung-hae a final sentencing of 2 years imprisonment for party nomination interference, the third case. Thus, Park has remained in jail for over 3 years. She still has 2 more cases under trial. The appeals initiated by the prosecutors, since Park has been boycotting the trials, went to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court returned it to the lower court. On May 20, 2020, the prosecutors demanded a 35-year sentence for Park at the Seoul High Court, presided by these judges. Hundreds of others have been treated unjustly and without proper due process after the impeachment. They also faced charges made after sensational media reporting about their supposed sins. Some are still under investigation, some are imprisoned, some are both, and 3 of them lost their lives. According to Hyo Ha-young Jung, former executive officer at the Blue House in the Park administration, about 700 to 800 people were charged and investigated under Moon Jae administration. A partial list is below. They include ministers, national assemblymen, intelligence agency directors, and employees, judges, lawyers, professors, police, entertainers, artists, journalists, a hairdresser, and an ordinary citizen. Those who call for Park Jung-hae's release are not only stating that she is innocent, but are also calling for restoring the gravely damaged rule of law in Republic of Korea. All citizens should be equal before the law, not above or below depending on their political affiliation. All of these facts certainly cause people to question not only whether the impeachment was legitimate, but whether the rule of law, an important component of liberal democracy, exists in South Korea. Again, the journalists at JTBC and other mass media have a crucial role, in fact a responsibility, in reporting facts and informing the public and helping to rebuild the rule of law and improve human rights in South Korea. And guys, I'll put a link in the description to all the articles and to this study right here, but they've done a study, a statistical analysis on the vote in South Korea, and they have found that it was highly anomalous. So here's where we're at. They impeached their president with the collusion of the media, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. They installed this new regime, and now several years later they have their first election, and it's an uncomfortably large landslide that nobody saw coming. So bad that it causes 2 party members to just immediately resign in terror. It sure seems like to me like South Korea is under heavy communist attack. I'm going to say that again. South Korea is under heavy communist attack. And the more we look at the details, the United States is under heavy communist attack. Anyways, guys, we'll do more about South Korea. We're going to keep our eye on it. I'll catch you next time. Like, share, sub.